The Ping ERC2 wedge. In 1990, the USGA declared war on grooves. They decided V-shaped grooves gave players too much spin control from the rough, so they mandated U-shaped grooves instead. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Ping had been manufacturing the ERC2 wedge with V-grooves since 1985. When the USGA tried banning them retroactively in 2010, Ping's founder Karsten Solheim pulled out a decades-old lawsuit settlement that specifically stated Ping ERC2 wedges were legal forever. The USGA was legally trapped. Suddenly, pros were hunting down 20-year-old Ping wedges on eBay. Phil Mickelson famously played them. The USGA had created a situation where ancient clubs were more desirable than modern ones. They banned new technology, but couldn't touch the old stuff. The Ping ERC2 remains legal to this day, and it's the most embarrassing loophole in golf history. Spring-like effect drivers. In the early 2000s, driver technology exploded. Manufacturers discovered that thin titanium faces flexed at impact, creating a trampoline effect that launched balls significantly farther. The COR, coefficient of restitution, was getting out of control. Some drivers were adding 20 to 30 yards compared to older models. The USGA panicked. They set a KOR limit of 0.830 in 1998, meaning the ball couldn't spring off the face too fast. Then they capped driver head size at 460 cubic centimeters. Clubs like the original TaylorMade R7 and Callaway ERC2 were too hot and got banned from professional play. Here's the kicker. Those clubs are still legal for amateur play. The USGA created a two-tier system where pros play with restricted equipment while weekend golfers can use the illegal stuff. It's a weird double standard that admits the clubs weren't really dangerous. They were just too good. The Polara self-correcting ball. Technically a ball, not a club, but this ban is too legendary to ignore. In the 1970s, Polara created a golf ball with asymmetrical dimples that reduced slicing and hooking by up to 75%. You could swing terribly and still hit relatively straight shots. The USGA banned it immediately, citing that the ball reduced the skill element of golf. Polara sued, arguing the ban was anti-competitive. They lost. The USGA argued that golf's integrity depended on equipment not compensating for poor technique. But here's where it gets interesting. Polara relaunched the ball decades later, specifically marketed to high-handicap golfers for casual play. The USGA still won't allow it in official competition, but they can't stop you from using it on your weekend round. The ban stands as a perfect example of the USGA protecting tradition over fun. Long putters and anchoring. For decades, golfers used long putters anchored against their chest or belly. Players like Adam Scott and Webb Simpson won majors using them. The technique reduced the yips by creating a stable pivot point. It worked incredibly well for players struggling with short putts. In 2016, the USGA banned anchoring, the technique, not the club itself. You can still own a long putter, but you can't anchor it to your body during your stroke. The reasoning? They claimed it provided an unfair advantage by reducing the role of hand-eye coordination. The backlash was massive. Players who'd built entire careers around anchored putters had to completely relearn their stroke. Adam Scott switched back to a conventional putter, and his putting stats immediately declined. Critics argued the USGA was penalizing players for solving a common problem. The ban remains controversial because it didn't actually remove long putters. It just made them awkward to use. The ERC2 driver. The Callaway ERC2 driver was the poster child for hot faces. Released in the early 2000s, it exceeded the USGA's KOR limit, making it illegal for tournament play but completely legal for casual rounds. The club face was so thin and responsive that it launched balls with excessive speed. Callaway didn't even try to hide it. They marketed the ERC2 as illegal on tour and sold it to amateurs who wanted every possible advantage. It became wildly popular precisely because it was banned. Nothing sells golf equipment like telling golfers it's too good for the pros to use. The USGA regrets this ban because it created a publicity nightmare. By banning the club from professional play, but allowing amateur use, they essentially admitted the club worked too well. Callaway got millions in free advertising, and the USGA looked like they were protecting pros while leaving amateurs with inferior equipment. U-grooves versus V-grooves. The Great Groove Wars reshaped wedge play forever. Before 2010, sharp V-grooves allowed pros to generate massive spin even from thick rough. The USGA decided this eliminated the penalty for missing fairways, so they mandated wider, shallower U-grooves that couldn't bite into the ball as aggressively. Manufacturers complied, but the transition was messy. Players suddenly couldn't stop balls on greens from the rough like they used to. Shot making around greens became more challenging. Some argued this improved the game by rewarding accuracy. Others said it just made golf less exciting to watch. The USGA probably regrets how aggressively they implemented this change. The rule created years of confusion, legal battles with ping, and forced equipment upgrades across the entire industry. Modern grooves are less effective than old ones, and whether that's actually better for golf is still hotly debated. Square-headed drivers. In 2006, Nike released the Sumo Square driver with a distinctive square head shape. The unconventional design maximized the size limits, while distributing weight to the perimeter for stability. It looked weird, but it worked. Other manufacturers started experimenting with non-traditional shapes. The USGA quickly clarified that driver heads must have plane in shape and limited how far manufacturers could push geometric designs. They didn't ban square drivers outright, but they made it clear that truly radical shapes wouldn't be approved. This is a ban the USGA probably doesn't regret, but it shows how reactive they are to innovation. The moment something looks too different or performs too well, regulations get stricter. It's a constant arms race between manufacturers pushing boundaries and the USGA pulling them back. The excuse wedge, chipper. Two-way chippers and excuse wedges have been controversial for decades. These clubs combine putter-like design with loft, letting players chip with a putting stroke. They're incredibly easy to use around the greens, which is exactly why purists hate them. The USGA technically allows chippers, but with strict limitations. They can't have faces on both sides, can't exceed certain loft angles, and can't resemble putters too closely. Most innovative chipper designs get rejected during equipment approval. The USGA regrets how inconsistently they've handled this category. Chippers help high-handicap golfers enjoy the game more, but the regulations are so confusing that most players don't even know what's legal. It's a perfect example of rules making the game more complicated without clear benefits. Moment of inertia. MOI limits. In 2006, the USGA capped the MOI, moment of inertia, on drivers at 5,900 grams per square centimeter. This limits how forgiving a driver can be on off-center hits. Manufacturers had been creating drivers so forgiving that missed hits barely cost any distance. The MOI limit prevents drivers from being too easy to hit. You can still miss-hit shots, and they'll still go reasonably far, but there's a ceiling on forgiveness. The USGA argues this preserves skill as a factor in golf. Critics say this ban punishes average golfers who would benefit most from forgiving equipment. The pros can hit the center of the face consistently anyway. They don't need help. It's recreational players who suffer from MOI limits, and the USGA has never given a great explanation for why making golf harder for amateurs is good for the sport. The takeaway: the USGA's equipment bans tell a story of an organization constantly fighting innovation. Every time manufacturers make clubs that help golfers play better, the USGA steps in to protect the integrity of the game. But integrity is subjective. Some bans make sense. You can't have golf balls that eliminate slicing entirely. But others, like the Ping Eye 2 mess or the anchoring ban, feel arbitrary and poorly thought out. The biggest irony? Many banned clubs are still legal for casual play, proving they weren't actually dangerous, just too good. The USGA will keep banning clubs. Manufacturers will keep innovating, and golfers will keep arguing about whether tradition matters more than progress. One thing's certain: the clubs that get banned are usually the ones that actually work. Which banned club do you wish was still legal? Drop a comment below and let's argue about it.